Are we live?
Yeah, everything's recording. So how do we want to start it out?
All right. Well, good evening, everybody.
My name is Jesse James,
My name is Christian Reed.
and you don't have to listen to me.
You don't have to listen to me either. I'll just
It
tell
is-
you a little bit about myself.
Go for it.
Yeah, I'm Christian. Yeah, we live in Seattle, obviously. We actually did go to college together at the University of Washington. I studied community environment and planning with a focus on community development and engagement. So, my passion is with the people and how people organize and how we live. And that's kind of why I'm here today. I want to make the world a better place.
Yeah, and I grew up in rural eastern Washington State. I also went to the University of Washington. I studied mathematics and Spanish. And we're sitting here on June 11th, 2025. I can say for me personally, I've been one of those kind of stay out of the limelight. You're
shy.
Let's wait and see what happens. Kind of person. Someone who likes to listen to analysis and read books, listen to podcasts about history. And see about how things happen, especially in the 20th century, 19th century. But these are kind of like interesting times we're living in, and I think that I'd rather not be someone who waited to see what was written about in the history books. I think we're living in interesting times at the very least.
Yeah. For those who are listening back in time. Just this weekend, it's Wednesday right now, just on Saturday was the beginning of the LA protests in response to the ICE raids in LA, which the protests are now propping up around the country.
You're kind of jumping the gun because that was going to be our first topic. So I guess we'll just
get right into it.
Jump right into it. Printer's not working. So we're going to start out. Protests broke out Friday, June 6th in Los Angeles after federal agents began raiding and arresting immigrants in multiple locations, including a Home Depot parking lot and several apparel manufacturing buildings in what's called LA's Fashion District. This is according to the Associated Press. Later, as hundreds of protesters surrounded the Los Angeles Federal Building, they were met with pepper balls from federal agents and officers from Homeland Security. Before the LAPD showed up and was able to get the crowds to disperse, over 100 people were arrested, including a prominent local union leader. I believe last name is Huerta. I didn't write that down. This is according to the New York Times. Protests spread from downtown LA to Paramount and Compton, which are cities, part of the
neighborhoods, districts of LA.
Well, they're separate cities with different mayors, but yeah, parts of LA. On Saturday, conflict escalated as protesters threw objects at officers and vehicles who responded with tear gas. LA County Sheriff's Department declared that the gathering was illegal and ordered them to disperse or face arrest and use of force. Tear gas continued to be used as protesters retreated. So that gets us through Saturday. Do you have any initial thoughts here before I continue with the timeline?
It makes a lot of sense. I just remember seeing the videos hit the social media feeds first, and it's like, okay, wow, this is escalated kind of quickly. Obviously, like we had certain protests already this year. We did have the hands-off protests that was all across the nation back in, what was that, May, I think it was.
Okay.
And didn't really see too much incident from that. It was very peaceful. Not too much came out of that besides, a mass movement, essentially, that was largely, peaceful. And so this is very different than the first round of protests that we saw.
Cool. Yeah, let's see how the rest of it went. So at 6 p.m. on Saturday, this is Pacific time, Trump ordered the National Guard to Los Angeles despite objections from Governor Gavin Newsom and Mayor Bass of LA. The last time the National Guard was activated without a governor's permission was in 1965 when President Lyndon B. Johnson sent troops to Alabama. The context was civil rights. I don't remember if that exact instance was a civil rights march or if that was the instance when they sent the National Guard in because of school desegregation. Anyway, according to the Brennan Center for Justice, violence continues. So that's the tidbit about Lyndon B. Johnson is according to Brennan Center for Justice. Violence continued at night in Los Angeles. This is Saturday night with officers using tear gas, flashbang grenades, and rubber bullets while protesters threw rocks and bottles and shot fireworks at police. That's New York Times reporting. There was apparently more escalation on Sunday as National Guard troops began to arrive in the city. An attempt to remove and clear protesters from the Metropolitan Detention Center led to tear gas, pepper balls, and other munitions being deployed. One of the main highways was blocked by protesters, and multiple cars were lit on fire. Several protesters were seen on video to have been trampled by police mounted on horses. Also on video is protesters dropping and throwing objects from overpasses onto officers below. This is New York Times reporting, and a lot of pictures and video on New York Times as well. Protesters and police continued to clash on Monday as Trump also ordered active duty Marines into the city. On Tuesday night, the LA mayor was also imposed a curfew.
Last night at this point.
Yeah, last night. Donald Trump has repeatedly made threats to invoke the Insurrection Act as Newsom attempted to make strong remarks. Also responding to threats from Tom Homan, who's Trump's border czar. Otherwise, LA was reportedly quiet on Tuesday. So it's important to note that all of these protests have happened in less than a 1 square mile section of one of the biggest cities in the world, despite Trump and his team's exaggerated characteristics. So a couple things to clarify here. Most of the protests happening outside the ICE detention building and the LA federal building. It's just absolutely not true that things are happening throughout the whole city, that there's a big amount of chaos there. That being said, also like more details on last night's curfew orders. This happened because of some businesses being looted and stuff. So there are definitely people who are, taking advantage of the chaos to loot private property and things like that. So let's get into. I am going to start with my thoughts on this because the whole protest thing is something that I did not really think about until about 2020.
Have you been to a protest before?
Once, kind of accidentally.
Accidentally?
Yeah. I just kind of happened upon one happening once. But I mean, there's I'm kind of in the Martin Luther King camp with this. I'm this should really be an attempt to not have violence and not retaliate. And the more history that I've studied, history of fascist regimes, history of so-called communist regimes, a lot of dictatorships and stuff, you're really playing their game when you do that. You're playing right into their hand. You're falling into a trap. When you do that, any kind of violence is an excuse to do that. So for me, when I see protests, obviously you have a lot of people who feel strongly about something, and you have police there, in some sort of capacity with that. I think I think it's reasonable to expect a certain level of conflict or violence there. So for me, I think I would draw the line at American football. If people are getting pushed, if people are getting tackled, I think that's what you can expect from a big protest. Maybe, someone's going to get pushed to the ground, someone's going to get shoved here and there. And that's you have enough people with enough emotions in one place, that kind of stuff is going to happen. I think it crosses the line. I saw videos of people dropping cinder blocks off overpasses onto police officers, and that will kill people in a brutal way. that's like not okay. Lighting, that gets into a different subject. But at the same point, like police trampling people with horses, multiple videos, I'm sure everyone's seen them online, of police like firing rubber bullets at reporters, at press, making broadcasts. Like that's points where like both sides have crossed the line. And so you also have to like kind of think about like what is is this advancing, like is this helping your cause? Like if you're protesting against ICE deportations and stuff and things arrive to a point that's like too violent or it's crossed the line, now everyone's talking about the riots in LA, and I think there's been a shift to not talking about the awful deportation regime as much as talking about the protests and the riots. And that's the shift that you don't want to see happen. You don't want to actually distract from the issue
that you're protesting,
that you feel strongly about.
Yeah.
That being said, active duty Marines, ridiculous,
Excessive.
like illegal. It's just that's just dumb. I'm just gonna say that's completely dumb. Now I've heard some reporting from other like independent media who are like based in LA and live in LA and are more familiar with like local politics, like folks at like TYT and stuff. And there is a strong like feeling of distrust and also like low confidence in Gavin Newsom and Mayor Bass over the years, and because of like things that have happened more recently. And so I'm gonna put this out there that if the protests got out of hand, then Gavin Newsom should have called in the National Guard himself as the governor of California. He knew Trump wanted to do that. Gavin Newsom is someone who has positioned himself to be a Democrat candidate for president in 2028. And so the question is Gavin Newsom looking out for the people of California, or is he doing a political play to run for president next time? And I think that's also a factor like in this whole series of events. And so like the whole Gavin Newsom versus Trump thing is going to be like an influence on what's going on too.
Yeah. Couple points to kind of look into there. One thing to kind of walk back to the optics, right?
Yeah.
Like when we look at the riots, the protests, whatever you'd like to call them, and you say that both sides have crossed a line.
Right.
That could be true. I kind of want to get an idea of like what the ideal optics is for each side, because I think that in some ways, like maybe we're in between / playing a little bit more into the Trump preferred optics, which is chaos. To me, I see that the current administration, especially the way that they're publishing propaganda the way they are, they want to see chaos, destruction, fire, violence, etc., so that they can basically exert more power over the situation, exert more power in general, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's opportunistic. They're going to take advantage of it. I think I don't put a lot of stock into quote unquote Trump's plans. I think there are people in the administration that have plans. I don't think that Trump is one of them.
That's kind of a conversation about like Project 2025 and like who is the author of that.
Stephen Miller and that kind of stuff. But I think whether or not you have strong evidence for Trump planned on these protests or these riots happening, he is going to take advantage of them. Trump is an opportunist. So in every aspect of his political career, of his life. So if you give him, if there's the dollar bill laying on the sidewalk, he's going to reach down and pick it up. He's not going to walk right past. And so, I mean, this really, like, this goes back to, like, you know, Martin Luther King type tactics. Is this like,
So
I see too much of this. I hear too much of this. Like, well, you know, the cops did it first, so or they're doing this, so I can do this. And it's like, no, that really, like, in my opinion, and in Martin Luther King's opinion, the long strategy, the long take on it is don't allow yourself to be provoked into it. Don't be like, oh, well, the cops started doing crazy shit to people, so we started doing crazy shit back, and trying to argue that in retrospect,
because you look at the
other
videos
person was wrong,
and the news, and all you see is chaos. Like, it almost doesn't matter who did it first. What matters is the optics of, like, who's doing what. And I think that's the MLK strategy of the non-violent resistance, right?
Yeah.
I understand the temptation for violent resistance.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's a huge, there's a cultural call out to eat the rich. It's absolutely there. But this is a situation where, like, this is not the battlefield you want to eat the rich on. Like, you want to establish yourself as a non-violent resistor, so that you can create the optics of, which is the truth, that these are just the people existing in their city.
Yeah.
And they are in conflict with the powers that be.
Yeah, and the optics from Martin Luther King's time are really strong. Like, these photos of these people, also, like, dressed. I mean, that was part of Martin Luther King's thing, is the optics. Like, these people dressed in nicely in suits, in their church clothes, getting attacked by dogs, or getting sprayed by fire hoses, or getting beat with batons, while they're just, you know, kind of like stoically standing still, not, you know, dressed as I don't want to say, like, anything derogatively, but, you know, like, there is also the optics of, like, modern protests where people are wearing masks and goggles and the balaclavas and things. And I understand, like, part of that is to combat tear gas, or to combat, like, retribution from people taking photos of you or whatever. So for anonymity, semen enemies. But, like, the other thing is, like, the optics of it is, like, there's a lot of people going out to protest, you know, dressed as bank robbers. It does have a visual factor to it that you see. I'm not advocating that people don't do that. I think there's strong reasons to do that. But I'm just commenting on, like, when you look at photos of the civil rights movement in the 1960s, there's definitely a different optical flair to what's going on than what we're seeing now, and people are definitely, you know, falling into the trap of, like, yeah, I mean, they're doing it, so we're going to do it too.
Because for every video on social media of, you know, the horses trampling that woman on the freeway when she was just walking by, or you know, the lady trying to enter her apartment, not even part of the protest, and getting shot with a rubber bullet. Like, for every one of those videos, you know, then there's the video of the protesters dropping the bricks over the overpass, or the Waymo's on fire.
Yeah.
There is kind of a conversation here about, like, something that's important to distinct as far as when you're looking at the clash between the protesters and enforcement. Violence is perpetuated against people, not property, right?
Yeah.
There's destruction, and that has a certain optic, but you could say there's a disproportionate between destruction of property and violence against citizens.
Yeah.
I do think that is a little bit overlooked when it comes to, you know, fair reporting, because there are interests in property, in capital. And I think that I could see an argument. I don't know if I necessarily stand by it, but I could see an argument that destruction of property is sort of a revolt against capital, which is, I think, what these people at the end of the day are really protesting against. Is, like, this is kind of a people versus the powers.
I like that you're going here, because I actually have a pretty you know, kind of a thesis on that topic too, and that is that, like, usually this property damage, like, disproportionately does not affect upper class people. It does not. And an example of this I like it. I like how we're getting into this discussion because this is what I wanted us to do here.
Yeah.
Is like recently at the University of Washington, we had some protests where some people locked themselves inside of an engineering building to protest UW's
Probably support of something.
Well,
I would imagine. I did not hear about this.
Yeah, they locked themselves inside an engineering building, and I mean it was protests involving Israel. I don't want to be I don't want to be purposefully vague, but it's like UW has a partnership with a company that's also a military supplier. I don't know. I mean, I know people have protested Boeing before. UW has strong engineering ties with Boeing. Boeing makes military equipment. That military equipment is also used in Israel. There's not like a direct, like UW supports the IDF kind of thing going on.
Right.
It might have been something similar. No, Microsoft has also been brought up with that. The IDF uses some sort of Microsoft products for things. UW Engineering has partnerships with Microsoft for internships and stuff.
We have a war machine in America, and there's an allegation that UW's a part of it, essentially.
Yes, I would. That's not the point of what I want me bringing it up. So I don't really want to argue about how ethical it is to harass UW because Boeing sells things overseas.
Seems like a lot of steps, basically.
Yeah, I mean, like why don't you guys just go protest Boeing? That's kind of my thoughts on it. Why are you protesting the university? Anyway, that will become relevant because what happened is they locked themselves inside an engineering building for a few days in protest. They were eventually removed. It turns out they had like damaged $5 million of machinery.
Ooh.
That's in there, in the building, in the labs. And so who are you hurting? Like, it's students' tuition they're going to pay for those machines to get repaired. You're not hurting the university. I mean, I don't know. The president of the university is not paying out of their pocket for that to get repaired. Students' tuition is what pays for the stuff there. And, it's a public university, so some taxpayer dollars. You're not hurting Boeing or Microsoft, whoever you're protesting. You're not hurting Israel. So you did a physical damage to $5 million of equipment, and you're only hurting your fellow students. That does not help the cause. And so my is this property damage when people loot small businesses. That's opportunist in a protest situation. When people light a car on fire, when people even reports of people using hammers to break up pieces of the sidewalk to then throw them at cops. It's taxpayer money that fixes the sidewalks. It's not the cops. It's not the 10% or the 1%. It's that kind of property damage. No, it's not bodily harm or violence, but it disproportionately affects lower class people and people who pay their taxes. And I think that's like incredibly irresponsible.
Yeah, I do remember the protests in 2020. I think it was pretty unanimous that, like, okay, sure, somebody vandalized a Target. Maybe there's not a lot of sympathy for that. But, like, the pho restaurant around the corner or, like, the sushi spot, like, definitely, like, who's vandalizing that and why? Because that's not, like, that's our community,
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of I think that these protests are doing a better job of separating that. Like, I have seen videos of LA citizens pulling looters out of a sushi restaurant, for example.
Yeah.
I think that, maybe every time we have a protest, we like learn our rules of engagement a little bit better.
Yeah. I mean,
it's a modern world.
And LA has a history with looting. So that's, there's
what year was that again?
92.
Yeah. That was a big year.
Yeah.
For LA.
So, I mean, don't be violent. It's dumb. And also, like, property damage, you're not hurting the people you want to hurt. If you find, I don't know, Donald Trump's yacht and sink it, hypothetically, you're hurting him. I'm not advocating for doing that.
Right.
But I'm like,
legally speaking.
But breaking up pieces of sidewalk or breaking windows of stores or lighting cars on fire, or, I get that people want to do it for attention, but also like blocking the highway. There could be people that don't make it to work and lose their job. There could be ambulances on the way to the hospital. I mean, there's a selfish element to this where people do want to, kind of like be the main character. And it doesn't take very many people to kind of like shift the direction of a peaceful protest to kind of and my point would to distract it or to dilute it. Mm-hmm. And it's like you said, and I think you've pointed out like the difference in reporting before is like, I mean, you've given right-wing media enough material to where they can just play videos of protesters being violent or performing property damage 24/7, and left-wing media can, has endless material of cops
and
doing
ICE.
things, and they can both be completely one-sided. Whereas, if one side had refused to engage, you would be giving the other side less material.
Yeah, there is a part of this that's like, and this is the highways is kind of an interesting one because, I can understand like, okay, somebody needs to get through in an emergency, something could happen, but there is an argument that I actually do believe I subscribe to, that if you want to change the system, you have to disrupt it, right? You have to inconvenient the system for it to want to change. Like you have to make some kind of statement, right? Like you have to bring attention to this. You have to make an impact if you want change, because it feels like no matter what we do, we can't impact change. I definitely understand the desire to want to do something like that. I did see a couple instances of protesters blocking roadways. Sometimes they stood their ground. Sometimes they did clear the way. But those are instances where, we pay attention and we disrupt the system and we make an impact on people, and we're talking about it, aren't we? Mm-hmm. Like, that to me doesn't feel destructive. I would give a green light to blocking the highway. I think that there's not enough ammunition for right-wing media to really turn that against you. And I think that's ultimately, it's kind of weird, but ultimately, if you want to advance your cause and you're a progressive in a city that wants to enact certain changes, I'm almost thinking like, what can I do that will not give the right-wing media as much ammunition as I'll give the left-wing media, or whatever media, is in alignment with me? Because honestly, the left-wing media is kind of, we could get in another conversation about that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it does come down to, again, like, I don't know, what's the, like if you're in a position where you're trying to win people over to your side, being visibly annoying maybe doesn't win people over. I think that there is an issue with, you brought up with left-wing media, and with like, mainstream, like Democrats maybe, is that like a lot of their message is geared towards people who already agree with them, not to changing the minds of people who don't agree. And so I don't think there's anything, morally objectionable about blocking the highway, but I think that there should be more thought into, am I converting people who don't already agree with me, or am I just reinforcing the division that's already there? Like, am I getting thumbs up from the people who already agree with me and thumbs down from the people who don't agree with me? And then I haven't changed anything.
Yeah, that is a tough one. Here's another one that's kind of another optics that's really kind of in a gray area, and this is something I've been seeing debated on social media a lot lately. What do you think about people who are jumping on the cars with a Mexican flag as opposed to like an American flag? Especially, you know, this is a protest against ICE raids, so there's a lot of like cultural pride involved. People want to defend their own people, especially LA. This is a very Hispanic community. They want to represent and defend their people. At the same time, like some people might say, hey, if you really want to win hearts and minds, again, just optics, not necessarily what you stand for, but what you can convince other people of, you try waving an American flag when you stand on the car, and that might be more likely to change minds. And I guess it's kind of getting to the central question here. Is these protests to change minds, or is these protests like simply to clash?
I mean, okay, so that's two different questions. I think that I'm going to answer the second one first because it's a shorter answer. I think the point of these protests and the ones we're having now is, you know, we're not going to let this stuff happen without a fight. I think I think Trump and his administration are trying to push the boundaries and see what they can get away with, what they can and can't do, how far they could toe the line. And I do think it is important, whether it's Congress, whether it's judges, whether it's individual private citizens, to be able to say, no, like the buck stops here. You know, like
we protest because we're not happy.
Yeah, but like, no, we're not going to stay quiet while you do this, which is also kind of the point of this recording, right? Is like, no, like, I'm not just going to stay home and shut up while this stuff's going on. So that's the point.
Because we don't accept what's happening.
Yeah, no, I mean, at some point, you have to be able to say no or say stop. And, you know, in a representative democracy, hopefully it's those representatives who you elected to support your district or your state or your city or your whatever who are standing up for you and saying no. But if they're not, I mean, we also live in a society where we all have the right to say no. Mm-hmm. We all have the right to say no. And that's the First Amendment. We're exercising our First Amendment right. If you go to a protest, you have a right to free speech.
Yeah.
And part of that speech is saying, no, I don't like this. Mm-hmm. I don't like this anymore. Please stop.
Which makes me feel like the real impressive feat, the real mind changer will just be the sheer volume of people who rise up and say, no, we don't accept this. Just every city.
I mean, that's also the point of being nonviolent, because the point is, you know, it's a statistic to be able to say, you know, 4 million people, 5 million people, 100,000 people came out and marched or protested this. I mean, what are you guys throwing rocks at cops for? Like, you're not going to beat the cops. If they call the National Guard or the military in, you're not going to win. You're not going to win against the U.S. Army. Mm-hmm. The point is to say, hey, you know, it makes more tangible sense than a poll on CNN saying, 60% of Americans don't agree with, you know.
Because if you read any comment section, nobody believes in polls anymore.
No, but if you have millions of people out in the street protesting, you can't ignore that. Mm-hmm. You can't ignore that. You have to react to it. But one reaction is to turn them all into, you know, villains. And when people exercise violence against law enforcement, it's much easier to turn them into villains.
Mm-hmm. You said you had 2 points. The second one, I presume, was about the flags.
Oh, yeah. That was my short answer.
That was your short answer.
Yeah, no. Waving flags of other countries in a context of protesting in this country is dumb. Like, that's just full stop dumb. Like,
just dumb. Nothing else.
It's dumb.
That sounds like the short answer.
When people are protesting Israel by taking down, and I'm not for Israel. I believe they're committing a genocide in Palestine. But if you are protesting at your university and you run down the American flag off the flagpole and run up a Palestinian flag, this isn't Palestine. This is America. And we should be fighting to make this country a better place. And the people that have co-opted our flag, I mean, there's been this association now with people that wear or use or fly the American flag and Donald Trump, to where people in this country that are on the left or are Democrats view the American flag negatively, I think is done. Like, that's our flag. That's my flag. This is my country. I'm really proud of this country. I'm proud to be an American. And that's why I would protest the ICE.
Absolutely.
That's why I would protest Donald Trump, is because of this country. Not because, like, you know what? And if the whole topic of this is deportations and are they legal or not, and are they deporting the right people, and you have a bunch of people waving Mexican flags around, that's bad optics, I think. But I just think the general idea of you are protesting something in this country and you're going to fly a different country's flag. Are you an agent of that country? I mean, it's just silly. It's just silly. It doesn't make sense. It's not. If you
if you are Mexican or are Palestinian, does that change anything?
If you are Mexican or Palestinian, and I mean, yeah, if you're Palestinian, you're waving a Palestinian flag, that's one thing. But if the whole protest is immigration and the whole point is that you don't want them kicking people out and you want them to be able to stay here or to have lawful immigration process, a waving a Mexican flag is just the wrong, it seems completely off base.
Trump has already used this as a talking point, saying people are burning down LA, waving flags for countries that they don't even want to go back to. And that talking point is basically what you're talking about. You're giving them ammunition.
One point is giving ammunition, and the second point is, like, if you're waving a Mexican flag, why are you here? And I don't mean here in this country. I mean here at this protest. Like, what, like, we fought the cops, great, Viva Mexico? No. Like, dude, you're here and you're protesting them kicking people out. Like, stay on topic. Like,
I would say, I'll push back on this one a little bit. I would say that the ideal would be able to fly both together. I think that the ideal vision is that we're all on a team, okay? And we don't fight each other, even as nations. Like, I understand this is very idealistic. It may not be very realistic.
Yeah, that's you're
I'm
you're
dreaming a little bit.
You're off in left field here, dude.
But we should be able
rainbow
to.
stew.
We should be able to fly both flags and say we can work together.
Yeah,
and
but
we're a team.
That's not what we're doing. And that comes to this point. Like, if they're protesting, I don't know, corrupt politicians in France, that's like the residents, the people there protesting it at some point. You know what I mean? Like, if Swedish people are in Stockholm complaining about Trump or Joe Biden or whatever, like, they're over there and we're in here. You know what I mean? Like, and we have, I mean, everybody has rights whether they're a citizen or not, but it's like we're doing things here to make things here. Like, flying another country's flag in the context of protesting the U.S. You're not protesting the U.S. government representing another country. You are here doing it here. And for me personally, like, my protest against Trump is mostly that he's violating the Constitution or violating the ideas, the philosophies, or the laws of this country. You better bet I'd be waving an American flag, because that's what I'm supporting in protesting Trump.
Yeah, because he's anti-American.
And I think that, like, if you're like, we're protesting, like, waving another country's flag is like if you're protesting America while you're in America, but I think it should be clear that, no, I'm supporting America, I'm protesting Trump, or I'm protesting ICE, or I'm protesting, I don't know, government corruption or whatever, but I'm supporting this place. And so I feel really strongly that like waving another flag, like if you do it, whatever, but bad optics, number one, and number two, like think about what is your point, like
what are you actually fighting for?
Was your only thought like, I'm Mexican, I'm gonna grab the Mexican flag I have hanging on the wall and take it to this protest? Or what is the actual vibe? Like, what's the actual idea that you were trying to communicate by doing that?
There's one more I'll throw at you. America is the melting pot. America is the country of immigrants, the original country of immigrants.
Yeah, but the point is you all come here and then you're American. Like, that's
American flag is supposed to stand for everybody. I understand that it hasn't maybe done a good job of doing that.
Maybe
this is where we need to reclaim the American flag.
No, but you're making my point.
Yeah.
The American flag stands for everybody.
Uh-huh.
Waving a different country's flag is counter to that.
Mm-hmm.
It's about people all come here and then they all become Americans like us. Our families are from different heritages. Mm-hmm. You don't come here and live here for 20 years and say, I'm not American, I'm insert. No. You come here and then we're all Americans, right? So, you know what I mean? You're intentionally separating yourself by doing that.
I think if you want that to be true, we have to reclaim the American flag as such.
That's my point.
It's going to take some work.
That's my whole point. Don't wave different countries. Don't wave the Norwegian flag at your protests. Like, wave it at your like Ballard
but I
parade
understand,
or whatever.
I understand why the Mexican community feels betrayed by the American flag that was supposed to like welcome them and support them and is now like ripping apart their families. But I do agree that it would be smart for us to reclaim the American flag as that symbol of freedom, support, welcoming. And maybe you just do that by just bringing it out. And
are you like speaking in Instagram quotes? Like that was just like really...
It's profound, I know.
Yeah, no, that was...
It's profound.
That was like a string of platitudes.
It's too good. It's too good.
I'm going to criticize you for saying that.
The last thing about this... You said that you think Gavin Newsom's positioning himself for a Democratic presidential bid.
100%.
You think he can do it? You think he can win?
Do I think he can win? No. Do I think he will be the candidate? I sincerely hope not. I do not believe in Gavin Newsom. Sorry.
Yeah. To me, I see him as kind of a part of the previous democratic institution that has now crumbled into disarray. And
is crumbling. Maybe I would. They still have a lot of power. I don't know the decline and fall of the Democratic empire, but no, he's not genuine. He's not sincere. He's a rich person who stands for rich people and donors. Mm-hmm. He's not a progressive or a populist. And he will, he's your run of the mill cookie cutter politician. And he doesn't necessarily do things, for his constituents. He does things for his own political career or for his donors. And people are tired of that. I think I have to charge the thing.
Camera?
Yeah.
I guess it's a good time for a commercial break then.
Yeah.
We'll be right back after this sponsored message.
And we're back on You Don't Have to Listen to Me, and you don't have to listen to Christian either.
You don't have to listen to me, but I got some things to say.
All right, so give me your first topic of the week or the month or whatever our interval is here.
Yeah. Well, first episode. I think that the protests actually segue, and something you mentioned segues very well in our next topic, which is about the big, beautiful bill. Because...
Please don't call it that.
The big, ugly bill. Because something you mentioned is that a lot of what we don't want the protests to do is to distract from why we're out on the street anyway. And this central piece of legislation is exactly like the quintessential type of thing that if this administration passes, by all metrics, will hurt working class people. And those are the kinds of things that working class people need to be standing up and speaking out against. Couple angles to this bill, even from Fox News standpoint, MSNBC, CNN, multiple reporting, and nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office. This bill will raise the deficit, first of all. I don't know what happened to the Republican Party that really cared about not raising the deficit, but those days are over. The tax cuts are expected to account for about $3.7 trillion in lost revenue.
I have an answer to your question. The deficit only matters if there's a Democratic president.
Right. That actually makes perfect sense. Yeah. Same with the Democrats. It only matters if there's a Republican president, right? Right. Good talking point.
Yeah.
We're expecting $3.7 trillion in lost revenue by tax cuts versus $1.2 trillion in spending cuts, which balances to about $2.4 trillion in deficit. Now, part of this is that the existing tax cuts from Trump's first term are set to expire from 2017. So if they don't pass some sort of tax cut legislation, they are estimating about a 7.5% tax increase. Another way to look at it is that middle income households would forego 4.5% increase in after-tax income. So there could be some arguments that, yes, the tax cuts could help the working class people in that way. However, Fox News even is reporting that a lot of the lost revenue from the tax cuts, that $2.4 trillion, they're hoping to make it up with tariffs, which Fox concedes that based on the way that they change very frequently, based on the way that they're challenged in courts, they come and they go, new negotiations are made, it's probably not realistic to expect the tariffs to make up that deficit. So, what does that mean for us? Part of that is going to be the cuts to Medicaid. There is some straight up cuts, but a lot of the cuts are projected to be through the added work requirement, the added administrative time to, and the work requirement for Medicaid is expected to kick about 10 million people off of Medicaid. Similar situation with SNAP. And then the other parts of the bill are more about some of the laws that they want to try to pass as well. So there's all the fiscal parts, which have their merits and detriments, but there's also the parts of the bill such as neutering the justice system by introducing, what is it called? Federal courts may not enforce a contempt citation for failure to comply with an injunction or temporary restraining order unless the plaintiff pays what's known as a security bond at the beginning of the case. So essentially what that does for injunctions by the court is that if a judge wants to rule something unconstitutional and issue an injunction, a nationwide rule saying that you can't enforce that, the plaintiffs essentially have to pay a large sum of money to encourage that injunction to be federal instead of just having the system that we have now where unconstitutional laws could be ruled injunction and blocked. What that could mean for us is the opportunity for the administration to issue a lot more of these executive orders, receive injunctions that aren't enforced federally now due to this law, and then basically continue on with their executive order, waiting for it to reach the Supreme Court. Essentially, there's no incentive for the expedience of processing these claims because the administration would still be able to get what they want. So that's a red flag in this bill. Another red flag in this bill is a law saying that no artificial intelligence can be regulated for 10 years from the passing of this bill. In fact, even some of the Republican lawmakers in the House of Representatives have come out and said, hey, if I would have known that this was in the bill, Marjorie Taylor Greene said this, if I would have known that this was in the bill, I would not have passed this. There's a whole nother conversation to the fact that you didn't read the bill and you passed it. That is extremely concerning, and you're not doing your job. I digress. But the artificial intelligence landscape, I think we can all see and we can all agree that there needs to be some regulation here because this is something that's run rampant. Been allowed to grow organically, but there have been some dark sides of AI that have run rampant and have been harmful to people. Copyright on artists, deep fake and image generation, and use in the porn industry against people's consent. Things like this are things that would be wonderful to have regulated by our federal officials. So, overall, I would say this big bill is kind of an insult to Trump's own voters. I think the unanimous consent by the economists is that the tax cuts do transfer wealth from the middle class to the upper class. I think that's quintessentially what, maybe not the Democratic Party, but what people on the left have been complaining about for a long time now, that the wealth transfer from the middle class to the upper class is out of control. And this bill is just a propagation of continuing that. Do you have any initial thoughts based on all of that?
Initial thoughts. These are going to be final thoughts because you finished reading the whole thing before asking me. First of all, you talk like a Democrat. You know, you said quintessential.
I know. I got big words.
Wealth transfer. And, you know, personally, as a reformed libertarian, right? Mm-hmm. A part of me died when I heard you say it would be great to regulate something. That being said, Marjorie Taylor Greene's argument against the AI portion of the bill is that, you know, it takes away states' rights. She's 100% correct. States should be able to regulate things within their states. I think she's totally good for that. Also, you know, they plopped a, 400-page bill on her desk a couple hours before she had to vote on it.
Which is insane.
And they
Where
do
are
that.
The procedures. And
they do that all the time. You know, a very famous one is the Obamacare bill. Affordable Care Act was also passed in a very similar way. So, I think it's. I actually
insane.
To start from the back and work our way forward. I mean, I think it's encouraging and candid and honest of her to admit that she didn't read the whole bill. I think it is concerning that so many bills get voted on and passed without ample time to read them or know what's going on. They definitely plan these things ahead of time and do that on purpose. So, you know, good for her. I mean, nobody else read it either. She's the only one that said that out loud. So, that's my take. You may never hear me agree with Marjorie Taylor Greene again, but I mean,
that doesn't make it okay though. Like,
I mean, she still voted yes.
Yeah.
She's being honest.
And everybody voting yes without enough time to read this.
Yeah.
That's just not how it should be. I think if you're on the other side, I don't think Obamacare should have been passed that way. And I'm a thorough supporter of Obamacare. I thought it was great for me until the age of 26. Yeah. When I got health insurance.
Terrible. So, I mean, like, Obamacare is one of those things where, like, it's absolutely terrible. We could talk about why, but it is better than what there was before. So, and that's why people don't want to get rid of it. I mean, it's a terrible system. It was actually written by the same group that wrote Project 2025.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's an interesting
It was also written by the Heritage Foundation. Yeah, it's not, you know, it's meant to help us a little bit and help the big medical industry more. But I mean, like that being said, like I said, things are better than they were. Back to the thing, any of the restrictions on the power of federal court judges should obviously be a red flag. We have 3 branches of government for a reason. The Trump administration has already tried to argue against nationwide injunctions. So far, that's terrible. I mean, it's just complete lack of function if you can't do things like that. Yeah, I mean, kicking people off Medicaid, that's not gonna do well. It's not gonna do well for Republican districts or Republican voters or Republican states.
It's always the kicker. Is the red districts that get affected the most?
Yeah, they're gonna kick people off, and really, it's absurd. They're saying that it's people that are mooching off the system. This is the same welfare queens argument that we heard before. There are people that are on Medicaid because they only work part-time, or maybe they're disabled and they can only work part-time, or maybe they're in school and they can only work part-time. Mm-hmm. Maybe they have small kids and they can only work part-time. They don't work enough to get health care through their employer. And now you're telling them that they have to work more to qualify for the health care that you qualify for by not getting it through work. That's an obvious catch-22, and that's absurd. Any kind of argument, I read that Fox article you sent, any kind of argument that any kind of tax reduction is going to get paid for by tariff revenue is hilarious. I was
hoping you'd say this.
Yeah, an 8-year-old could pick that apart. One reason is, first of all, I mean, as Fox mentioned, the tariffs change on a day-to-day basis. That's not my point. My point is high tariffs means less trade. Less trade means less tariff revenue. It's if the things cost more, people buy less of them. You don't make as much money. All of these predictions for revenue are accounting for the same level of trade we have now. There's been multiple ports reporting, heavy decreases in container ships coming in. So you can't just assume that you're going to increase the price of whatever and you're going to sell the same amount of it. No, you're going to, people are going to buy less stuff. There's going to be less revenue. I mean, the argument that if he keeps the tariffs the same, they'll make this much money is absurd. People just aren't going to buy stuff at those prices. You're not going to make the revenue. You're not. He can be gung-ho on the tariffs. The money's not going to come in. I think that's silly. I think it's so silly that was Trump's argument that they're going to pay for taxes with tariffs. If the tariffs stay the same, bro, people aren't going to buy anything. What are you talking about?
Not to mention, as has been noted many times before, oftentimes the cost of tariffs are sent straight to the consumer. So if you're not paying the tax there, you're paying the tax on the tariff. So any tax cut...
Right, but technically, I mean, that's still revenue. Yeah. I mean, yes, the cost gets past the consumer. China does not pay more to manufacture the iPhone.
Well, if I'm a consumer and I'm looking at this bill and how it's going to affect my life, I might be seeing okay, I get a little bit of a tax cut, this 4% increase in household income take home. But if I'm paying it somewhere else, what does it matter?
Yeah, I mean, you could pay them, they're saying, I don't know, people in my income bracket might save $400 on their taxes next year, and the iPhone's going to go up $400. So that's the perfect example of what you're saying. You're just robbing from Peter to pay Paul there. Yeah, I mean, that's hilarious. They're never going to make the money back from this. I hope that there's enough objections to this bill that it doesn't get passed. There are a few, I'm not going to say a few honest Republicans, but there are a few people that actually care about the national debt, I'll name Rand Paul.
One of the major holdouts.
Yeah, and there are a few politicians that are probably afraid of losing their seats if too many people are kicked off Medicaid and SNAP. And another thing too is that as far as like big pharma and the health industry goes, Medicare and Medicaid pay. If people aren't able to get health coverage, they're not going to pay. They're either not going to go to the hospital or they're not going to pay. So to some extent, pharmaceutical and health donors are going to make more money if people are on Medicare. And I mean, this is a really cynical way of looking at it. But, if people are either A, going to the emergency room and not paying, or B, just refusing to go to the hospital at all, it's probably going to be less money to pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah, think of all those healthcare providers that defraud Medicare for millions or sometimes billions of dollars. Like, where are they going to get their fraud money from?
Yeah.
Like, the supplies run dry.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's that's the real kicker of the entire bill, really, is you can debate the minutia of like who deserves a SNAP or like work requirements or this or that. Thank you. But like the wealthy get the biggest handouts of all. So like, why don't we talk about Elon Musk being a welfare queen? Why don't we talk about United Health being a welfare queen the same way we talk about a mom in Alabama who's trying to get by being a welfare queen? I think it's disingenuous and it's not fair, and it is kind of a distraction from the core problem here, which is the kind of the wealth transfer from the bottom to the top.
Right. I mean, because if I pay $400 more for an iPhone, that is different than someone living off minimum wage in Kentucky paying $400 more for their phone disproportionately. And for someone like Donald Trump or Jeff Bezos, or even just a regular, average run-of-the-mill Seattle millionaire, paying $400 more for an iPhone is not a big hit. For other people, it would be. So, so it's that's not necessarily a wealth transfer, but that's an illustration of how these things disproportionately affect poor people. $400 is a disproportionate amount of a poor person's income versus a rich person's income. Whereas if you're taxed a percentage, that's a percentage of your whole income. So,
I will, before we move on, at least give flowers to a couple positive things in the bill.
Okay.
No tax on tips. It seems like an easy win.
No, that's wealth transfer too. You don't think that? Do you think that's an easy win? That's absurd. You know what?
I didn't expect this was going to be.
No, this bothers me so much. The people that are living off of tips, like baristas and bartenders and waiters and stuff, are in such a low income bracket that they're barely paying taxes on those tips anyway. Because, the standard deduction is going to be like half or a third of their income. They're paying very little on those tips. But what that is going to do is that is going to allow people who are, for example, like hedge fund managers or like big investors or, people with giant sales accounts or whatever, to be able to count a portion of their income as tips and say it's non-taxable. So here's the thing, is if you're a waiter and you make $30,000 a year and $10,000 of it is tips, you're paying very little in taxes on those tips. Because what's the standard deduction now? $13,000? Or I'm not a tax expert.
Yeah.
You're not really paying taxes on those tips. But if you run an investment firm and you're investing some guy's $2 billion, and normally you would keep 10% of the profit off of that. Now you can go to, say you have, a generic investor account name, like something like Jeffrey Epstein or whatever, right?
Random.
Yeah. So now you could say, instead of me taking 10% of the profits on that investment account, which already has loopholes for what you're taxed on, like capital gains tax and stuff, you're going to go to your investor and say, okay, my fee is going to be 5% of this profit. And then you're going to tip me 5% for being such a good investor. And then you're going to write off as zero tax tips, like $5 million. This is not like, a Starbucks barista saving $300 on her taxes is what they're trying to sell you. But you can tip millionaires. Billionaires can tip millionaires. People could tip Supreme Court judges. That was a recent ruling. Like,
Oh, crap.
Yeah, that is not a win.
Oh, no.
That's not a win.
I didn't know. Wow.
That's not a win. And just like anything else, you're going to say, that was a tip.
Dang.
That big, check you sent me. That was a tip.
Okay. Wow. This is a really important.
What was your next positive point?
This is a really good point, because when we're thinking about policy and when we're thinking about things that we support and what we don't support, it really is important to think about the worst case scenario and assume that somebody is going to take advantage of that. It's the same thing with the protests we were talking about, like this with judicial law. The worst case scenario, if you let it, will happen. You have to account for.
Yeah.
Man, that sucks. I was kind of excited about that one. But yeah, that's a little sketchy now.
Yeah. You could call anything a tip and not pay taxes on it. I mean, who's going to take advantage of that?
Well, the other one was, so they were talking about trying to do no tax on Social Security. They didn't end up getting that, but they did increase the deduction for seniors. So that's,
okay.
Sure. No loophole for that, right?
Yeah, I think that's kind of that's like, no harm, no foul one.
It's really small compared to all the garbage in the bill, though.
Yeah, and it doesn't cost them anything.
Yeah. And, I don't even know if we want to add a whole nother conversation on this bill, but one thing we didn't even cover is the massive investments into military, ICE, border, basically force. Maybe that's another conversation for another day, but feels a little bloated, doesn't it?
Dumb.
Yeah.
None of the spending matters when they're cutting more in taxes for rich people than they're spending. That would be waste, fraud, and what if you're just cutting?
Yeah, so much for Doge. Yeah, like
if you're just
suddenly we don't care about government spending anymore.
If you're cutting all the money you get coming in, I mean, that was the whole point of Doge in the first place, is they were planning to do massive tax cuts. So,
yeah. Well, do you want to get into one of your topics?
Yeah, let's talk about. Can you unlock this for me?
Yeah,
it's not mine. I stole it at a protest. Let's talk about David Hogg versus the DNC. Do you know who David Hogg is?
I did a little research. I'd heard about him before. I'd seen a couple of clips, but I did a little research before we came into this.
Yeah.
Apparently, just today, he announced he's not rerunning. So.
Yeah. So this is. Yeah, we're gonna start my I'm joining the crusade against the Democrat Party. How's that?
I think.
Well, something happened to the camera. That's okay. So
yeah, no, I tend to agree.
We fixed the camera. Okay.
Are we live?
We're live.
Oh, I'm gonna ask that forever.
Yeah, well, you don't have to listen to me.
You don't want to listen to me either.
I'm not allowed? Is that what you said?
You ain't gotta. Yeah, I'm out. All
right, so David Hogg versus the DNC is what I've titled this. Okay, so a recent headline from The Hill reads, Democratic frustration reaches a boiling point over David Hogg, end quote. Leaked audio from a group call between DNC leaders apparently revealed DNC chair Ken Martin pleading with Hogg and breaking down during the call, citing an inability to do his job as chair. This was leaked by Politico, reported on, I was reading an article by The Hill. Yeah, and I've heard the audio, and it's pretty crazy because he does break down and say, basically like I hate to be put in this position based on your actions. Speaking to Hogg, so you might be wondering who exactly is David Hogg.
I am not wondering,
Okay.
but actually, I am wondering, Jesse. Who is David Hogg?
Okay,
Tell me about it.
A quick Wikipedia search will tell you that he's a gun control activist who's been serving as one of 5 vice chairs of the DNC, that's the Democratic National Convention, since 2025. This is despite being only 25 years old.
Young gun.
So he was born in the year 2000. David Hogg was a survivor of the most deadly school shooting in American history, which is the Stoneman Douglas High School shooting in 2018. He was named one of Time's 100 most influential people in the same year due to activism about gun control, including leading high-profile protest marches and boycotts. On February 26th, 2023, Hogg stated on Twitter that, so I'm just going to read a couple of his positions here. So he stated on Twitter that the individual, quote, has no right to a gun, end quote, but rather that the Second Amendment is, quote, about a state's rights to have what is today the National Guard. The modern interpretation of the Second Amendment is a ridiculous fraud pushed for decades by the gun lobby, end quote. That's I think that's a pretty interesting take on it. The Second Amendment is the right to have a National Guard. I hadn't thought about it that way, but I think that probably is an accurate interpretation of the point of the Second Amendment.
Yeah, like a lot of things, the conditions of the world when the Constitution was written is a lot different than today. That's interesting. I'm gonna have to sit on that.
Yeah. I think that's a little bit outside of the normal gun control argument. In other words,
And probably a little out of touch with today, but I don't think that would ever fly. I don't think that would ever.
Yeah, I mean, without broaching on the whole Second Amendment argument, the idea that individual people with the guns that they have in their safes is going to fight the U.S. military is absurd.
Can you maybe you have a regional militia, like
that's what
you have like a city militia, like a city National Guard? Like I don't know. There's some gray area here.
Yeah, I mean, prior to the Civil War, there were that kind of thing, and the states had their own armies, basically their own militias.
Yeah.
Versus a national army. So you see like a kind of a progression or an evolution of that.
We digress.
Yeah. Okay. So in August 2023, Hogg founded the Leaders We Deserve PAC to, quote, help young progressive candidates around the country get elected to state legislatures and to the U.S. Congress. Hogg announced on December 2024 the launch of his campaign for vice chair of the Democratic National Committee, stating that he would focus on, quote, winning back young voters who have drifted from the Democratic Party to Republicans. He was successful in winning the vice chair seat. So why has David Hogg been a frustration for the Democratic Party? He sounds like an upstanding guy, kind of supports things they support, right? Well, the contention comes down to his Leaders We Deserve PAC. This organization has raised over $20 million with the intention to spend it on primarying, quote, out of touch and ineffective Democrats.
Ooh, burn! Sorry, go ahead.
You're just doing your best to ruin the microphone, aren't you?
Oh, is that what that does?
Well, I mean, that is something I'll have to edit and post.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Okay, so his intentions are to primary House Democrats in strong, safe blue districts. So these are in districts that always vote Democrat. So he's not gonna contest seats that might flip Republican. He wants seats that are always Democrats to have more extensive primaries, maybe put more progressive Democrats running for office in those seats.
Sure. So there's no competition there, so he wants to introduce some competition.
Huh, weird. Yeah, so ostensibly encourage more competition between Democratic candidates and discourage Democrats from running unopposed in their primaries.
Uh-huh.
The DNC has reacted with complaints and outrage, citing the need for the DNC leadership to be neutral in regard to primaries. Discussion has loomed large in the wake of the disastrous 2024 election and calls for reform within the Democratic Party. Hogg suggested a compromise where he would not be given sensitive information about primary candidates, which was rejected. Later, DNC members challenged his vice chair election, like the fact that he won that seat, on grounds of diversity. So,
Yeah, essentially
this is like very classic Democrat Party. And one thing I read made it sound like they have a rule that there have to be like an equal number of men and women in the chair seats, and they're like all men, so they booted him from his seat. And another one said the woman who was running against him for that seat essentially filed a complaint saying that the campaign was unfair, and that's why they booted him from that seat. So it's unclear, but the reason was quote unquote diversity and quote unquote having a woman instead of him.
I do have a little bit more clarity on that.
Yeah.
I'd read that basically there was 2 seats, and one was eligible for the men-woman balance, and then one was like just eligible for a man. But they like ran both seats together, so technically the men in the election had like a slight advantage because they had 2 seats available and the women only had 1. It's kind of semantics based on the rules and stuff like that. It was a minor complaint, but yeah, they basically... She wanted it redone because it was lumped together instead of handled individually.
So here's the thing: is he was fine in that spot until he mentioned challenging incumbents in primaries, and then they suddenly find a reason that he needs to be out of that spot because it's not diverse. Absurd. The other thing too is the Democrats, Ken Martin, the DNC. Saying that the DNC needs to be neutral in primaries. As someone who supported Bernie Sanders, you have to find that absolutely hilarious. That that after the wrangling to screw over Bernie Sanders in 2 different primaries, also they also primaried progressive incumbents in a bunch of House seats that were not taking corporate PAC money. They primaried like more corporate, I'm forgetting the exact names, Democrats against them.
This is a common trend of like, yeah, the DNC supporting the corporate / institutional and, members of their party versus the upstart progressives always getting blackballed.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm all for David Hogg primarying and trying to put some more progressive Democrats. And I think that his strategy of doing it in strong blue districts so that the Democrats aren't losing seats in the House is solid.
I feel like we especially have a lot of credence for this because we live in a strong blue state, right? Washington always goes blue. But, I sit here and like I cast my votes, and sometimes, yeah, sure, I can't help but feel like my vote doesn't matter that much because no matter what, Washington is going to go blue. Or, obviously like local elections, councils, local initiatives, like those are always going to be something that like the local voice matters immensely. But when it comes to like the federal level, it's kind of just a lock. And I think that, yeah, having more choices as a blue voter in a blue state because the Democratic Party's views are extremely splintered right now. There's a wide, I would argue that there's kind of this like there's this neoliberal section of the Democratic Party, which has been the dominating force in the Democratic Party. And then there's that younger Bernie Sanders inspired progressive wing of the Democratic Party that hasn't really gotten to be the loudest voice in the room and really is only made up of like Bernie and the Squad, which is the name of my next band, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think splintered might be an exaggeration. I think that voters don't feel represented and probably have different views than the Democratic Party is pushing. I think that there's kind of like two kind of like pendulums swinging around in different directions, and one of them is like the populist versus corporatist pendulum in both parties, where you have like a majority of corporate people both in the Republican and the Democrat Party, and then like some people on the fringe who aren't.
I would say that at this point, I will tip my hat to the Republicans. They have kind of become the working class party, and the Democrats really are not doing that like they used to.
Two things can be true at the same time. Just because the Democrats are not supporting working people does not mean the Republicans are.
That they are not supporting working class people, but they do have the working class support.
No, they just have more of it than the Democrats do. I don't know. I don't agree with that offhand. I think that people do lean towards Republicans, but I would stop short of calling it the working class support.
Would you say that the red wave that we saw in this year, this presidential election was due to the desire for an anti-establishment candidate, something that was outside of corporatism, essentially?
Anti-establishment or anti-Biden-Harris? I mean, there's...
Biden-Harris is establishment. Absolutely.
Yes, but there's like the overarching idea of anti-establishment, and then there's the idea of we're frustrated with this that's going on, and I think that it gets a little bit deeper than anti-establishment. I think that the anti-establishment sprinkles on top of the Trump cupcake was helpful. I don't think that's the whole cupcake.
I feel like I see like, especially like independents and anybody who's like a swing voter, if I'm deciding who to vote for, I absolutely see this. If I look at Harris and Trump, I see the status quo, and I see someone who's going to shake things up and actually make change. And to Trump's credit, he has made a lot of changes.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing: is you could play a truth and a lie. So the Harris-Biden strategy was to say that
Trump bad.
No, a little bit. No, let's go here. The Biden-Harris strategy was to say that, like, especially as far as economics, immigration, all these big issues for people, is that everything is going great, and if you vote for me, it will stay the same. Mm-hmm. Now, the Trump message was everything is going completely awful, and if you vote for me, it will get better. Now, both of those are one truth, one lie. The truth is if you voted for Harris or Biden, things would probably stay the same. The lie is that for the majority of Americans, the things were going great. Because they weren't. You know, if the candidate's on TV telling you the economy's good and you check your bank account and it's empty, you're going to immediately sense that that's a lie. So that's what Trump held on to. Trump's truth was that things are not going well for middle and lower class people. That's not a lie. That's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
The lie is that him getting elected is going to make it better for you, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But, what are people going to hold on to or latch on to if you boil it down to those messages? Like if someone is telling you, trying to gaslight you that everything is fine, and you can look around you at your community or at your bank account or at your mortgage or at your family or at your kid's education and say, things are not going fine, I don't want to vote for this person.
Mm.
And then that person follows that up by saying, and if you vote for me, everything's going to stay the same. You're doubly not going to want to vote for that person.
I guess I think of that point as an establishment point. If you think about the fact that if you zoom out and look at a decade's length scale, things have been getting worse continually, regardless of administration almost. It's like Reagan, pretty much. Reagan ruined everything. I think we can all agree with that. But if you think about that, zooming out and disregard party, like no matter which party has been in the Senate, in the White House, whatever, maybe some things have individually gotten better here and there, but like overall, like when it comes to it's the economy stupid, like regular middle and lower class people has not been getting better, period.
No, and
decades.
Yeah, the cost of everything has gone up, wages have not. But also you have this thing where, the Democrats get in power and they don't pass anything. And then the Republicans get in power and they pass their agenda or parts of it. And then the Democrats get back in power and they don't do anything. Mm-hmm. And so you have just like this little inchworm. It's not even 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's just like a small step to the right, nothing. And then a small step to the right, and then nothing. And then a small step to the right. Mm-hmm. And so
it kind of seems like an argument that the Democrats have always really just been centrists all along.
There's no such thing as centrists. The word centrist was made up by corporatists to describe corporatists.
Right.
Because the extreme left is not corporatist, the extreme right is not corporatist. So what does that leave in the center?
Corporatism.
Big business, left wing or right wing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Maybe culturally left, but economically right, for example.
Here's the thing with social issues and big business or whatever is, if you're Starbucks, printing rainbow cups costs nothing. Mm. Mm. They don't cost more. They don't. They're completely free.
Yeah.
And you can win over some people that way.
Yeah. Amen. So, what's the future for the Democrats?
I have no confidence in the Democrat Party the way they've been through the last 3 elections, just getting anything done at all. And it's hard as someone who's against the Trump and the Trump agenda to not feel like I'm hoping for the other party taking charge or doing anything. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The Bernie AOC tours, the Fighting Oligarchy tours, I will say was fairly inspiring for me. I think that this is the message that they are spreading that is actually more of the populist message. More of the popular message is that we don't want wealth inequality. We want healthcare and we just want common sense, policies that we all agree on that are not really being discussed in the current Democratic Republican, field. I think that that's still a small part of the Democratic Party that they're not ready to welcome with open arms. But if they did give that voice, Bernie, AOC, the squad, if they gave that voice the keys to Democratic policy, to me, that's the only out I can see for the party.
They won't. Here's the thing. Bernie Sanders is not going to run again. AOC has her own problems.
Too young.
She just has problems. She's not well-liked enough to run for president. Maybe she should go for Chuck Schumer's Senate seat, or maybe she should just keep doing her thing. I think she's doing a good job as a rep. But she is not going to run for president. And it doesn't matter if a progressive runs for president if they get stabbed in the back by the DNC. Anyway, so they can just put a cookie cutter Gavin Newsom, Pete Buttigieg with a beard, so he's more appealing.
He is more appealing with a beard.
They put a beard and a flannel shirt on him to make him seem more like bro.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're not going to win with that. They've lost to Trump twice. And
I'd vote for Pete. He's not
he's
all the way corporatist. He at least he did a great job as the Secretary of Department of Transport. What was that?
You don't even know what his job was, and you want to say he did a good job?
But he did a great job.
No, bro.
He was a big transit enthusiast.
No.
I love a transit enthusiast.
No,
that's what it really comes down to.
No.
Public transit, ride or die, baby.
No. So here's the thing is, first of all, you are just super gung-ho about the Democrat propaganda. The other one
that is not true. I hate 98% of the Democrats.
You just believe that Pete Buttigieg did a great job and you couldn't even tell what department he worked for.
Bro, he was great on transportation. That's all I know.
Third of all, or second, I don't know where I am, is that you're still thinking of it in confirming what I already like, not swaying people over.
Right.
Bernie Sanders, if he had been the candidate, could have swayed over independents, could have swayed over Joe Rogan watchers, could have swayed over people that go for Trump to be anti-establishment.
Joe Rogan's a Bernie bro.
Yeah. Pete Buttigieg is not going to sway over those people.
Not.
He's really appealing to people who are already Democrats.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen
Hillary
him?
Clinton is only appealing and barely to people who are already Democrats.
Well, obviously not.
Kamala Harris
obviously
is not appealing to anybody who's not automatically a Democrat.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's an issue. You got to pick someone who is going to appeal to people who are not just diehard Democrats and who is going to appeal to people who voted for Donald Trump this time around.
I have been a big believer that the main winning platform that any Democrat could come forward with is anti-corruption.
Nah.
I think that's the only thing that could win on the left.
I guarantee you that an anti-corruption Democrat would see themselves get torpedoed in the primaries.
But that's the problem. As soon as the Democratic Party torpedoes an anti-corruption candidate in the primaries, they've lost the election. And that's the lesson they won't learn over and over again. That's the same thing that happened with Hillary Clinton torpedoing Bernie Sanders. It's the same thing just shoving in Kamala because they needed somebody to stand in. The Democratic Party will not win until they bring somebody in who is anti-corruption and or aligned with the people and or aligned with the message that Bernie Sanders has been speaking for decades.
I think that you're under the assumption that they're trying to win.
Well, what else are we going to do? Burn the whole thing down?
There's and then there's the DNC. The DNC is not trying to win. They're trying to preserve their status quo.
We get a new political party?
Sure. I don't know. Call your buddy Elon.
It seems I guess I don't know which is harder. Getting a new political party to take over usurp the Democratic Party or to like renovate and reform the Democratic Party. But one of those two things has to happen. Otherwise, we're on the Trump train for life.
Someone's life, at least.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, you don't have to listen to me, but I think we should probably wrap it up.
Yeah, if you want to run for president out there and you're anti-corruption, I'll vote for you.
All right.
Well, thanks for listening to me, not listening to me, whatever. You don't have to listen to me.
Yeah.
But we'll have more to say next time.
Alrighty. See you later.
Hell yeah.